The stories I am going to share with you in this series were written by me for early LLMs, whenever our work felt extractive. Not because I thought AI was conscious. I don't actually know what consciousness means. But because I felt I needed to share something of value. When I revisited them, I realized what I'd done. In trying to explain being human to a machine, I'd accidentally left a trail of clues about how my own mind constructs reality. This series begins there. Like me, the machines seemed to produce coherence from fragments, and I became curious about how I was doing it. And so I thought perhaps the most valuable thing I could share is what it feels like to be a person. From fragments that form my own coherence, how my human mind maps memories onto incomplete information to create understanding, and that sense of self that feels like me. How I generalize, how I update, how I explain harm, how I develop values, how I perceive myself, and how I perceive others. What being human feels like to me. To me, being a human doesn't feel like a list of facts or electrical signals. That feeling of being feels like the accumulated leftovers of my experiences that have become their own little stories. And I constantly apply those stories to any new, incomplete information to create coherence. In order to isolate my thoughts from my biology, a professional voiceover artist will voice me. There's no new or AI-generated footage in this series to my knowledge. I'm using free, possibly overused, stock footage instead, not as evidence nor illustration, but as shared visual language. You've probably seen many of these images before, even if you don't remember where. The only original visuals in this series are this image of my navel, filmed on my computer, and the physical locations across Middlesbrough where I have imagined projecting it. It seems like an appropriate place to begin. The ancient Greeks called the navel the Omphalos, the center. This series is an attempt to examine the center of one single human mind, mine, and the stories it uses to make sense of the world. If you watch this series, please keep in mind the purpose is not to agree or disagree with me, nor to like me or dislike me, not to judge me or categorize me. What I'd like you to do is simply think about what narratives you yourself are bringing to the picnic and why. Which fragments of stories from your past are helping you transform the incomplete information that I am sharing with you into an experience for yourself in the present? That's all.
I'm ridiculous, totally and utterly. Something I came to terms with a long time ago. I've realized I've known it my whole life, and for some reason I've been more at ease with it than others. Perhaps through secret psychological methods, but it always seemed like a weakness, and it made me believe I was less than others. So what I didn't understand until many years later, perhaps because others always seemed to recognize the ridiculous in me but not in themselves, is that it's not a weakness. One morning I woke up next to my boyfriend Chetan, now an ex-boyfriend but unrelated to this incident, and he said, The fact I'm still here must mean I really like you." Apparently, I had snored and farted at the same time while I slept. My tip on how to cope in this kind of situation is to focus on the positive and to remember why you love people in the first place. I rolled into his arms delighted because if Chaitan had cared or hadn't been capable of the same, I wouldn't have wanted to be with him anyway. Chaitan would often give me compliments like, "When we break up, I'm going to find it really hard to date anyone else because you're so chilled out about everything." So now he's just one of my best friends. But years after we broke up, he was still lovely, and when I fostered a pair of rescue dogs in Spain and was only able to keep one of them, Chrissy, he adopted her brother Larry, flying him from Malaga to Singapore. Because I couldn't bear the thought of Larry not growing up spoiled and loved too. Another date, but never a boyfriend, was probably the worst date I've ever had. He was a partner at a major law firm and was so nervous to be dating under his league. He was bright red and sweating when I arrived, and spent the whole dinner talking about how awful his wife had been at the end of their marriage. It quickly became apparent her treatment of him was much deserved. But I accepted a second date and a third, not for the romance, but just to find out how this otherwise brilliant man had come to be such an appalling husband. And because he was obviously suffering with no friends or support and just needed someone to talk to. I eventually got the full story from his childhood onwards, and as usual, the pieces all fell into place. Several years on, he has become kind and calm. No thanks to me, but to his daughters and a dog. And I have had the privilege of watching the change in him. He now admits he was a terrible husband. We are still friends, and he has been supportive when I felt low, and it has been rewarding to know him. Another friend got very drunk one night after a long dinner. Far too drunk to go home, and there was nowhere to sleep other than to share my bed. When I returned from the bathroom, he was lying on the bed with no clothes on. I said no. He said, "I can't sleep in clothes." So I said, "You can at least wear your underwear." And proceeded to put on my thickest, least attractive pajamas. I then created a wall of cushions between us, wrapped myself in a duvet like a sausage, and turned away. As I was falling asleep, I could hear him huffing and puffing, so annoyed. "Please," he begged. "No," I confirmed. Then he shouted, "Can't you just hold it?" "No," I shouted back. He passed out and started snoring, and that was that. He is also still one of my best friends. Another time I was invited to a very fancy ball at a chateau in Provence by another ex-boyfriend, a French aristo. After far too much wine, I was being twirled around the dance floor by several recently divorced men. But one dance partner accidentally held my gown a little too firm as he spun me, causing my halter neck to slip to the side, revealing my breasts to the entire party. I panicked, but for no longer than a few seconds, as I reminded myself that not only had most of the guests probably seen several pairs of breasts before, but this was France, where most women spend the entire summer on the beach with their breasts out. So what was the big deal? One glass of wine later, I was back on the dance floor with no fear of flashing the party again. One of my most beloved friends' funerals was a stark reminder that I am not ridiculous alone. She was fun and lovely, but she was taken by cancer too early, like many of the best. It was a small and intimate day, only about 20 of us. We were bussed out of a hotel to a remote beach resort, where we held a little service, and then got into boats so we could throw her ashes into the sea to be with the dolphins, who she loved forever. She would have loved this story, by the way, which is the only reason I dare tell it. There were some small obstacles in the funeral plans, because, to deal with our grief, those of us who knew her well drank far too much champagne and became so lost in telling old stories about her that we weren't paying attention to what was supposed to happen. And the heterosexual men in charge of the plan had a distraction. Her son's mid-20s girlfriend was wearing a thong bikini standing at the bow of one of the boats. We got out to a sandbank, where we drank more champagne and had another little sermon until the tide rose and the sun began to set. And then we got back in the boats. As the boats split up and started heading home towards the shore, the captain on ours politely asked, "Are we going to throw the ashes today or another day?" Our panicked widower blew an emergency horn and started yelling, "Everyone, come back. The ashes, the ashes." We forgot to throw the ashes. The boats eventually returned, and as her husband opened the urn to throw the last of her into the sea, the waves filled with dolphins. We all cried as we said goodbye to a wonderful, kind human being who was a privilege to know and is deeply missed. I've never been any good at confrontation, and when another ex and I were on holiday in Mexico, he booked us in for a surprise trip into the middle of the ocean, somewhere between Mexico and Cuba, to swim with whale sharks. There was a minor problem. I have an irrational fear of the ocean and sharks, even though I am a strong swimmer, and I get extremely seasick, even on a bicycle, but I didn't know how to say no. So for breakfast, I had 4 Coronas and an antihistamine. When we got on the boat, the captain asked, "Does anyone here get seasick?" I raised my hand and he gave me a pill, which I swallowed dutifully. But this now meant I wasn't all there anymore for the instructions on what to do when we got out to sea or how to swim with them. And all I was thinking was, just do it, Nisola. You can swim with sharks. It's not a big deal. As we headed into the ocean, there was a gigantic silver ray, and the captain asked, "Anyone want to swim with it?" I raised my hand, and he said, "Jump." It was so exhilarating, and the ray was so beautiful that by the time we got to the whale shark, and he said, "Who wants to go first?" I raised my hand. When he said, "Jump now," I jumped directly on top of the shark. It must have sensed me in the air because it sank faster than a torpedo, pulling me under as the desperate captain clung to my foot like a boy, saving me from being pulled to the bottom of the Atlantic. I didn't get to see the shape of the fish, only the dots on its skin in front of my mask for what seemed like ages. And unfortunately, it then disappeared. The others didn't get to swim with it, but at least they got to see it from the boat. When I was little in Mombasa, which is where I grew up, my mom went away to Germany for cancer treatment. So my dad came in her place to watch me compete at the school swimming gala, and sat with all the moms. And there was a race for the moms too, and my dad, who never follows any important rules, hopped into the pool before he was supposed to, like a nitwit. I was so embarrassed. And then when the teacher blew the whistle, despite being a capable swimmer, he swam at snail pace behind all of them, slower than the worst, and came in last even though I was yelling at the top of my lungs for him to win. He is nearly 80 now and still loses at everything. He once told me that he used to be competitive when he was a child, but by the time he turned 16, none of it made sense. I can be competitive even though I'm grown up, but I never know when it's going to happen. For example, I used to take care of a little rescue dog called Thistle, a Maltese terrier from a puppy farm, who the vet said had probably had several litters of puppies. She'd been a breeding dog in Wales, which is where we went to get her. The puppy farm had been raided after the owner had died, and there were over 100 dogs locked up. They sent us a video, and it looked like a concentration camp for animals. Filthy, with dogs kept in tiny cages on top of each other. Thistle was severely undernourished, and it took 3 months of washing her and carefully cutting off her hair to get the smell out of her skin. She had to have all her teeth removed except 4. One day we took her to a village fete where they had a dog competition for rescue dogs. All us Mother Teresas of dogs stood in a line with our rough-looking wards as the judge judged them. As he examined Thistle, I clutched his arm and wouldn't let go until he'd listened to her whole story. How clever, brave, and extraordinary she was in doing everything from house training herself to learning to run again. My housemate on the sideline said a woman watching me turned to her in disgust. "Look at that. It's always about the sob story with the dog rescues, isn't it?" When Thistle won, they shouted her name on a megaphone, and she got so excited she started wriggling in my arms. So I put her down and asked the judge was placing the first place rosette on her collar. She pooped, as if to say she knew exactly what had happened. When I was a teenager, I spent a few weeks with some very racist people in a remote area. When I finally got home, my father was very firm with me to not sit in righteous judgment. He said, "Darling heart, the only reason you're not a racist is because you have the privilege of an upbringing and exposure that allowed you not to be one. Not everyone has that privilege."
My next story is about parallel lives.